Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. This is not one of my stories, but this is one of who has become my favorite author. He's an essayist and short story writer called Joseph Epstein. This one is called The Love Song of A. Jerome Minkoff. It's too long, so I've edited it by around half, so it's an appropriate length, I think, for you guys. It's about 9 or 10 minutes. Anyway, Dr. A. Jerome Minkoff, family practitioner, 3 years a widower and coming up on his 64th birthday, met Larissa Friedman 2 years into her widowhood and 52 at a charity dinner at the Ambassador East Hotel in Chicago for ALS, dreaded goddamn Lou Gehrig disease, from which both their spouses had died, and they were seated next to each other at the same table near the dais. Mrs. Friedman gave the few things he said full court press attention. She smiled. She agreed emphatically. More than once she touched his forearm, gave it a gentle squeeze. Larissa Friedman lived in Los Angeles, and Minkoff recalled her saying that she was staying at the Drake. Of course, we're talking about Chicago. Late though it was, he called her there and asked if he might drive her to O'Hare tomorrow, a Wednesday, and a day off for him. Minkoff picked Mrs. Friedman up at 9:30 a.m., and they arrived a touch after 10. Early. She suggested a cup of coffee, and so Minkoff pulled up in front of the O'Hare Hilton. In the hotel coffee shop, they exchanged talk about the cruelty visited upon their late spouses by disease, and about their own lives, as she put it, as bachelors. More than once, Minkoff felt her knee touch his. Concerned about the time of her flight's departure, he checked his watch. "No worries," she said, smiling. She called United Airlines from her cell phone and rescheduled her flight. She leaned toward Minkoff, giving off a strong whiff of expensive perfume, and whispered into his ear. He had spent 4 extraordinary hours in a room upstairs in that airport Hilton with Mrs. Friedman, make that Larissa. He hadn't himself entirely neglected things down there, but Larissa Friedman had refreshed his memory of how revivifying they could be. She told Minkoff that she planned to be back in Chicago early next month and hoped they might be able to spend some time together then. Yeah, sure, of course, he would look forward to it. They kissed, and she patted him, twice, on his bottom as he walked out into the cool hallway of the O'Hare Hilton. Things progressed quickly. Larissa Friedman called to say that she was returning to Chicago 2 weeks earlier than expected, and would have the use of an apartment in the 900 North Michigan Avenue building that was owned and used as a pied-à-terre by a neighbor of hers in Brentwood. Their week together left Minkoff exhausted. Every night, Larissa made reservations at one or another of those restaurants that Minkoff used to read about with less than casual interest in Chicago magazine, but had never taken his wife to, where the well-connected people ate. A great privilege, apparently, this. Larissa had acquired tickets to the Symphony, to a Goodman Theater production of Death of a Salesman, to Steppenwolf, where they saw Lady Macbeth deliver her monologue in the nude. Afterward, she and Minkoff retired to the pied-à-terre and did not sleep much. Minkoff worked long hours. He began making his rounds at Rush St. Luke's at 7 a.m. He saw 20 patients a day, but instead of shuffling off to bed at 9:30 every night, he was out with Larissa Friedman, whose energy in bed or out on Michigan Avenue appeared inexhaustible. Only a day after she returned to Los Angeles, she called him and asked him to come on the following weekend to attend a dinner party a few friends in Los Angeles were giving for her 53rd birthday. At LAX, after picking up his bag, Minkoff discovered a limo driver holding up a sign with his name on it. He and the driver exchanged few words, but when they were near Larissa Friedman's house in Brentwood, the driver pointed out a house across the street. This is where O.J. lived when he knocked off his wife and her boyfriend. As they pulled up in front of Larissa's house, Minkoff noted in the driveway a convertible of a dazzling blue in a make he didn't recognize. Maserati, the driver said. Lisa's house was capacious. The dinner that evening was at a restaurant called Spago. 4 other couples were there. Everyone called Minkoff by his first name. 2 of the women obviously had had plastic surgery. Lots of talk about the food. Large quantities of wine were drunk. Once again, Minkoff felt himself odd man out. When the check came, Minkoff insisted on paying his and Larissa's share. The men put their credit cards down, and when the waiter returned with the check, his part of the total came out to $680. I have to tell you, I'm not a $680 a dinner guy, Minkoff told Larissa once they were back in her living room. It's not that I can't afford her a dinner like that from time to time. It's just that I feel there's something intrinsically wrong about it. People lie and cheat and even kill for money. This being so, I've always felt that the least I could do is respect money. Spending that kind of money for a meal isn't, in my opinion, respecting it. Minkoff assumed his life with Larissa Friedman would be lived in Southern California in her house. He imagined himself driving the blue Maserati top down, the Pacific Ocean on his right, the wind whirring through his thinning hair. He had originally planned to retire at 70. Would it matter all that much if he knocked off 5 years earlier? Minkoff's wife had never taken to California, northern or southern. She thought it thin. That had been her word for it, thin. She would go on about it. Not that I have anything against good living, she said, but a person shouldn't make it the center of his life. Marlene, his former wife, was full of opinions. If you stitched them all together, they constituted a point of view about how a person ought to live, for work, for other people, for something outside and larger than yourself. And she lived her point of view, or so Minkoff always felt, which gave her an impressive dignity, a certain standing in his eyes and in those of their friends. Later that week, Larissa called to say that she was coming to Chicago and asked if it would be all right if she stayed in his apartment. Of course, Minkoff said. Should I pick you up at O'Hare? What airline are you flying? No need. I've arranged for a limo, she said. Actually, my friend Harriet and I have chartered a plane. With having practically get undressed with security checks and all that, flying commercial is getting to be a big bore. Larissa arrived a little late, a little after 5 o'clock, with 2 large Louis Vuitton suitcases for a 3-day stay. She told them that she had tickets for the Lyric Opera that evening, Placido Domingo in La Traviata, and they needed to be there by 8. There wouldn't be time for dinner until afterward. Minkoff opened a bottle of Riesling, put out some cheese and crackers. Over a glass of wine, they talked about his moving to California. I'm a little edgy about it, Minkoff said. For one thing, I've never not worked. I'm not sure that I'm built for leisure. Don't worry, baby, she said. We'll have a wonderful time, a full, rich life. Minkoff wasn't entirely sure how things had gotten to this point. He hadn't proposed, but once that "we" had established itself in Larissa's conversation, it was as though she had already arranged for the movers. She had taken to calling him every night. In their nightly conversations, the word "when" began to replace "we," as in when you move to Los Angeles and when we are together. Minkoff also learned, almost by the way, that Larissa's husband, who had died of ALS, was actually her second husband. She had a first marriage made when she was only 19, and that lasted only 2 years. She was a good closer, Larissa, give her that, Minkoff thought. Minkoff arose early the next morning to get ready for his hospital rounds. He made coffee, and trying not to wake Larissa, got in the shower. He was shampooing when Larissa entered. "Hello, darling," she said with a sleepy smile. "Seems a shame to waste the water, so I thought we might as well shower together." She put her arms around Minkoff's neck. He remembered the last time he had been naked in the shower with a woman. In the same shower, Larissa's highly maintained body, the work of so many hours in spas and at health clubs with personal trainers, should have filled him with a sense of all the promise that life still held out, even at his age. Instead, he felt only a deadening sense of emptiness and betrayal. "It's not going to work," Minkoff heard himself say. "That's all right, darling," she said. "We've got all of tonight." "No," he said, the water splattering them. "I mean, my moving out to Los Angeles, our getting married." "Why? What's wrong, baby?" she asked, looking up at him, water dripping down in her eyes from her fine French haircut. "What's wrong is, I am I, and you are you." "What's that supposed to mean?" "What it means is I'm not California, I'm not Brentwood, I'm not Maserati, I'm not Spago dinners, and the truth is I have no interest in being any of those things." "Try," she said. "I have tried. I've wasted your time. I'm sorry. I apologize." Larissa left the shower. Was she crying? Minkoff couldn't tell. She had wrapped herself in a red towel, and as she departed the bathroom, slammed the door. Minkoff realized he still had shampoo in his hair, and hadn't had the entire time he was telling Larissa the things that weren't going to, and hadn't the had the entire time. He was telling Larissa that things weren't going to work out. A nice clownish touch, he thought. Send in the clowns, he heard himself mutter. Don't worry, they're in here. He didn't know any of the other words of the song, but he began softly humming what he remembered of the melody. In no hurry to leave the shower, he carefully soaped up, finished his shampoo, shaved, and readied himself to haul those 2 large Louis Vuitton suitcases onto the street and into a cab so that he could get back to work. In any case, that's a short story by Joseph Epstein, edited, roughly 50% of it. The story is called The Love Song of A. Jerome Minkoff, and it is the title story from his collection of short stories. In any event, as usual, I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel. In any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.